What's up, gente? What's up, Raza? So I want to answer a question really quickly on what does it mean to be Chicano Part Two, and the question being that can a white person or somebody who's not of Mexican descent be a Chicano or a Chicana and identify that way? And so that's a popular question that's been raised several times. And to be honest with you, it comes down to an experience that one has. It comes down to the upbringing that one might have. And you can be born in Mexico. You could be born, for example, in Central South America, Honduras, El Salvador, even Cuba and Puerto Rico. These are indigenous. Homelands, if you want to put it that way. So if you have that indigenous blood, today's version of the brown berets, I would say, especially the younger people, we've looked beyond flags and we just don't, keep it to Mexico. Even though in the 1960s and 70s, that is the immediate experience that a lot of people, because of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo and other historical experiences that they had, were of Mexican descent. The families were living in places like Mexico, San Diego, the Southwest, and it motivated a lot of people of Mexican descent to identify as a Chicano and Chicana politically because they weren't accepted by the common or majority, culture here and people here in America, and yet they were, spoke a broken Spanish because their experience had been also living here in the States, and their English was probably better than their Spanish. And so it had to do with more than just the country of Mexico, although a lot of people trace it back to that. And today we recognize as brown berets, we admit members of different indigenous backgrounds into our brown beret ranks because of that. And we recognize that we're all indigenous. And as a matter of fact, a lot of us as brown berets, we do not recognize these borders because they were man-made, a white man-made border versus what our ancestors taught us, that this land belongs to everybody, and tribes were had to migrate for long times just to survive, or maybe they were there in their homelands and they would come back or stay for hundreds and even thousands of years. However that we did it, we didn't recognize these borders. So when it comes down to the question of what is a Chicano or Chicana, and can you be one if you are not of Mexican descent, the answer is yes. The answer is yes, because as I mentioned earlier in one of my first videos, I believe Chicano and Chicana also is not just an experience, but it's an experience that ties us directly to the land. Through our DNA, we have this indigenous blood. And yes, we recognize that Hernando Cortez came in 1519, and he basically started swarming and taking over Mexico, and was successful with the diseases and the colonization, including the Spanish language that we speak today. We recognize that, but also as early as the 1400s and the 1600s, when the Pilgrims came, for example, and white people came from Europe, they conquered the North, and today people speak English like I do. People speak French. In Canada, where a lot of indigenous people, that was their language. So we recognize that indigenous people were everywhere. We were conquered and colonized, and so we recognize that indigenous DNA that runs through our blood. If anything, that indigenous DNA that runs through our blood, that is our passport. That is the only proof we should ever, need to show that, hey, we're of this land. And so I wanted to answer that question. It's a popular question, and that's cool, especially because we do have amongst our ranks in the Brown Berets people from, their parents are from Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, Nicaragua, even places such as Colombia, and yes, even Brazil. All that is part of the Americas. And so, having answered that question, I want to move to the next part of that is what about a Chicano? Can you have that Chicano that is half white or all white? And we call it sometimes the Miklo effect, going back to the movie Bound by Honor. It's an older movie. And also the American Me, another movie. A lot of people watch these popular movies and they get caught up in the pop culture, and they get caught up in the entertainment part of it, and they remember these movies. But one thing that we know from these two movies is that you had somebody who actually had white blood growing up as a Chicano or Chicanos, and they had that experience that other Chicanos had in Los Angeles and other places like that. And again, it does go back to the experience. You have a brother or a sister who has a half white, or even we've had brothers and sisters who are half black who joined the Brown Berets, or even some that are full white and full black, and that is rare. But the brown berets, they operate independently, autonomously for the most part. A lot of the chapters, and that question really does come down to uh, who is that person, and we try to vet people because we don't put restrictions on people. As a matter of fact, we've had some great brown berets that were black, that were white, or were half white, half black, and for us, it's not a question. It doesn't matter. What's important is their heart, the corazon that they got here. Them willing to, take the stand with the oppressed, with the people of Aslan or the people of this land, indigenous people, because of their experience. Some of them may not have had that experience growing up where they were discriminated against because of their broken English, or because they passed for white to begin with. We do have a lot of people who do pass for white to begin with. They may have that, that drop of Chicano, Mexicano blood, but the truth is, that experience is important. What we do want people to do, especially allies, comrades, co-conspirators out there who are our allies, white brothers and sisters, black brothers and sisters, what we do want, especially our white brothers and sisters who have white privilege. That means they can go places we can't. They can get through doors we can't. They get opportunities we don't. We want our allies, our white allies especially, to just understand that the brown berets, especially today, has always been a space to protect raza chicana or chicana and chicanos. Always been a place, a safe space for the people to know that they're protected, that they can go to, that they can join, they can flourish in. But we don't want people just to come in and culturally appropriate what we've created. Um, we've continued, for example, the brown beret movement because we feel the need to speak for our people, to stand up for our people, to be there when our people need us. And the reason I say that is because each culture has their own experience, and the truth is, unless you grew up Chicano or Mexicano, you really don't know what it is to be chased by immigration or ICE in today's terms, right? You really don't know what it is to be called something like a spick, a beaner, derogatory terms, including the ugly word wetback, which I hate, by the way. That word goes back to 1954 and the Eisenhower administration. They created Operation Wetback. It was one of the largest, if it was the largest mass deportation military operation that we knew, and that term had been around before, and it was a term that especially white Americans used as a way to make fun of Mexicans, saying they swam on their back across the Rio Grande, and for them it was a joke. For them, they thought it was funny, but it's not to us. So I encourage you out there not to use that word. It gets you a lot of trouble. So during this time, unless you grow up, during this time, a lot of people grow up with a bad experience with those being hunted down, even going back as far as the zoot suit riots because of the way we dress. And every culture has their own experience. The truth is people within that culture who truly know what it is to grow up. And that is very similar to being a woman, being a man, being of a different religion. I could not speak for certain religions, even if I converted. It'd be very difficult for me to really speak on that religion right now because I didn't grow up in it. And race is very similar. Culture is very similar. That's why we want white people to have strong, agendas where they advance society, but that they don't enslave people, don't put us down, right? We want Black and Asian and even Islamic Muslim communities to have strong representatives. That's why brown berets are not out there waving American flags, trying to speak for America first or make America great. Because the truth is, our experiences as Chicanos and Chicanas, it clashes with that whole narrative of make America great again. Because if you go back to making America great again, what when black people were hanging off trees, or Mexicans and Chicanos were being hung on trees and hunted down by the Texas Rangers, when we were being deported or beat up by sailors during the Zoot Suit riots, when we were being chased through the fields at 5 in the morning by immigration because we went to work and we were undocumented, or they thought we were undocumented. If that's what it means to make America great, uh, again, then we don't want to go back to that. So if somebody's in that movement and that's theirs, we're not going to come out and speak. We'll speak against it because, again, it clashes with our interests and our culture, really. One last thing I want to say before I leave this quick, you know, report here or quick live here, and that's on race. Keep this in mind. Race is a social construct. What does that mean? It means it was created, it was invented. The truth is, if you look at races around the world, is there a black race, brown race, white race, yellow, the whole bit, you'll see that throughout history it took thousands and even millions of years for people to travel to live in a certain place where the melanin, maybe they didn't have it if they were in the north, or maybe they did develop it if they were in the south. And through evolution we were able to adapt. And a lot of people in these areas, some tend to be darker skin, lighter skin. Well, if you go back to thousands of years, that wasn't an issue. Race was invented, it was created as a way to divide us, and as early as the 1400s and the 1600s, especially when slavery really kicked in places around the world. And then in America, when they could not hold native indigenous people down because they would run away, or run back to the tribal groups, they could communicate. And then even if they did enslave white people and indigenous people before black people, they discovered that enslaving black people was easier to do that because they didn't speak a language, and they couldn't blend in as easily as indigenous or white people could if they were enslaved. And I say this because I don't want people to get caught up with race. Let's get beyond that. Let's get beyond that. Let's be wiser than that. The brown berets are more evolved than we've ever been. And when it comes to international issues, that's another thing. That's why we stand up for people who are oppressed. We side on the side of the oppressed, or we side on the side of what's just, because we recognize that as brown berets, we were created and we emerged in the 1960s, inspired by the Black Panther Party, as a militant organization to stand up and defend our communities. But we've evolved beyond that, and we've matured beyond that. A lot of our elders would tell you, from Cynthia Barajas, Carlos Montes. These are elders who are still around today, and they advise the brown berets on how to do some things, and how to be strong, and really, they advise us on some of the mistakes they made. And one of those mistakes was not caring about international issues. Well, we do care about international issues, and when we talk about race, culture, and what it means to be a Chicano or a Chicana, we've got a standing today that a lot of people cannot claim, because, like I said, our DNA, it's tied into the land, it's connected to the land. This is why we support Palestine, and we support the people of Palestine against the Zionist governments over there and the genocide that was taking place, because we understand that there are people who were kicked out of their land, that were occupied, that had to go through walls, checkpoints, had to show ID, were targeted because even their language and the color of their skin. So when we side with Palestine, it's because we have a historical similarity to Palestinians. That's an international issue that should be easy for any Chicano and Chicana. And I'll be talking more about other issues like that soon. But I did want to talk about that today, Raza. I did want to talk about that today, gente, because I know some of you have asked questions and have had questions. So I hope that I answered that for you. Again, Raza Chicana or Chicanos and Chicanas, it goes beyond skin tone, and it goes beyond being born in Mexico. It's an experience, it's a political, cultural, spiritual experience that we have, a psychological experience that many cannot claim, that even today we relate to with what's going on in Minneapolis and the ICE raids and how they're cracking down on Somalis. We can definitely relate to that. And that's why we side with the Somali community, the immigrants, the Haitians, those who are our Black brothers and sisters who are also here trying to make a better life for themselves. So, with that said, send in your thoughts, your questions, and I'll try to answer them. Again, Maestro Avitia checking out, and que viva la raza. Ho ho.